I want to ask a couple other questions. One, given the health focused mission of your companies that you founded, as well as the topics you cover in your Substack newsletter, I imagine you have a pretty interesting health stack of products or supplements, and maybe not. And so, maybe it's not so much on the supplement side, but maybe it's more on the way you exercise. Can you just share a bit about how you approach exercise and diet philosophically and talk about maybe tactically some of what you do?
Totally. A couple things here. I actually started recently working with something called Fount Bio, which I don't know if you've seen, but this is my roll of pills that I have to take a couple stacks of every day. So started working with them, which has been interesting. I would say my overall philosophy on health and nutrition has been pretty similar for almost a decade now, which is basically try and eat foods that I think that the ancestral health lens just still makes a lot of sense to me. Eat foods that your ancestors would eat, not too much of them, and try and avoid processed stuff, gluten, vegetable oils, seed oils, whatever you want to call them. And the class of basically highly processed, mostly packaged foods that I think are making Americans sick. And so I try and stay pretty far away from them, and then eat almost entirely versions of foods that are whole, as minimally processed as possible, and do so within call it an 8-hour eating window is basically my overall diet principle.
Do you do anything with exercise? I know from reading the newsletter, you're big into lifts, and you had a goal of doing 3 lifts a week and doing 300 lifts a year. I think this was last year. How do you approach that on the exercise side? It seems like maybe ancestral as well too.
It's so funny. I'm very into all of this stuff, but I also am into working and building companies. And so unlike a lot of the other people that I know in the health and wellness world, I would not put myself in an exercise optimizer, mindset or anything like that. And so I got a trainer, he programs 3 different lifts for me a week. I bike or play pickleball or swim or do something almost every other day. And that's basically it. And I'm not the strongest guy. I'm not the most jacked guy at the gym, but I'd say that I'm definitely athletic and fit. And I think that lifting weights is one of those things that if you don't do it, you almost certainly should be doing it, just because from a posture, energy level, increasing your base metabolic rate. I just think that it's possibly the most useful thing that you can do for yourself from a health standpoint. And I think for me, I've found that, 5 times a week lifting, I would end up skipping 1 to 2 sessions, which was basically not useful. And so now I stick with 3 and have made the internal decision to work more than is probably totally optimal for me from a health standpoint, but fine. Yeah, 100%. That's the trade-off I want to make.
Yeah. And I would just add on the kind of lift part. I totally agree. If you're going to do any type of workout, I think a lift makes sense for all of those reasons. But the other reason is just we don't move enough. Most people don't move enough. And so if you're going to go in the gym and do something, why not try to go heavier and do compound exercises and use your whole body?
That is another point that I think is interesting is I actually think many more people should be moving intentionally, and I don't mean just stretching, but just moving, doing intense exercises where you're increasing certain joints capacity and ability to move through points, like hip cars, things like this. I started working with a functional mobility person about a year ago, and just working with him and having him give me exercises so that my lower back is moving well, my hips are moving well, my shoulder joints have a greater range of motion, has been a total game changer from a pain and mobility standpoint in general. So I think that's one thing that I do that way more people should probably do.
Yeah, agreed.